Before marriage, my wife made me sign a prenup to protect her houses and commissions. I agreed. But once I became an attending making triple her income, she suddenly screamed the prenup was unfair and demanded it be dissolved. Hello, Reddit I plus here. I never meant to tell anyone what happened between me and Marissa, but every time I close my eyes, the truth presses on me like a weight. It began years before I ever understood what she had planned. Years before I realized that the moment our lives intertwined, a quiet trap had already been set. My name is Arlo, and I am 41 now. But this story begins when I was 32. Back then, I was drowning in surgical residency. I worked impossible hours, ate whatever I could grab between shifts, and lived in a cramped basement apartment with peeling paint and humming pipes that kept me up at night, even when I was supposed to be asleep. I carried more debt than hope, and each month I could barely cover interest payments. My salary felt like an apology rather than compensation. Then I met her. Marissa was 30 at the time, already successful, already polished in ways I had only seen in magazines left in hospital waiting rooms. She worked in luxury property consulting and had done so for nearly a decade. She owned 3 investment condos across the city, each one steadily climbing in value. Her commissions were impressive enough that she never talked about money the way ordinary people did. She talked about opportunities, leverage, long-term strategy. We met at an alumni gala for the hospital. I had been dragged there by a supervising physician who said I needed to practice being a person. She was there to network and donate to a surgical charity she supported often. She had this bright, sharp energy, like she always knew exactly where she was going next. For reasons I still cannot explain, she stopped right in front of me while I was pretending to care about a display of medical equipment. She asked my name, laughed at my awkward attempt to introduce myself, then asked if I wanted to grab a drink after the event. I remember thinking she must have mistaken me for someone else, but she had not. We started seeing each other. Slowly at first, then, all at once. She adapted to my brutal schedule with surprising patience. I adapted to her world of high-end clients, polished dinners, and real estate talk that sounded like a foreign language. A year later, we were discussing marriage. When she asked for a prenup, she framed it as a practical matter. She said she had built everything she owned through years of grinding, hustling, working late nights, and outshining competitors. She told me it was nothing personal. Her properties and commissions were simply her safety net. I agreed without hesitation. I had nothing to protect besides a worn-out mattress and student loan paperwork. Her lawyer drafted the document, and it was clear she would keep everything she currently owned. Everything she would earn from her consulting, everything she invested in, and all appreciation of those investments. The only things considered shared property would be whatever we bought together with clear joint funds. My attorney warned me the agreement gave me virtually nothing. I shrugged. I was in love, and I believed her when she said it was only precaution. We married 6 months later. She paid for nearly everything. We moved into a waterfront condo she had purchased a year before we met. She let me handle utilities to feel like I was contributing, which at the time, I appreciated. Life settled into an exhausting but stable rhythm. During my fellowship in trauma surgery, I made a little more but not enough to truly change anything. She continued her upward climb, earning around $250,000 a year. She paid for our trips, dinners, furniture, even the car we shared. She joked that she was my sponsor. I joked that someday I would repay the investment. We laughed. Back then, everything felt simple. But everything changed the moment my fellowship ended, and I finally accepted an attending position. My starting salary was $480,000, with overtime and specialist procedures pushing it far higher. I received a sizable signing bonus. I felt like someone had lifted a stone off my chest after years of suffocating. I cleared loans. I built savings. I contributed to our household more than ever. At first, Marissa seemed proud. She kissed me, told me I earned every bit of it. But after a few quiet months, she began making remarks. Small ones. Odd ones. She said the prenup felt outdated now. She said it made no sense for her to hold on to her assets while I was suddenly contributing far more to the household fund. She said separation of finances was unhealthy for a marriage and made us feel like business partners. She called the arrangement lopsided. She said the agreement protected her when she had been the higher earner, but now it punished her for my success. She insisted I dissolve it. I reminded her it was her idea, her contract, her conditions. That was when her tone changed. She said my income was only possible because she supported me through training. She said my long nights of studying, my exhaustion, my missing holidays and trips, all happened while we were together. She said that meant she deserved part of what I now earned, because her emotional labor and financial contributions had carried me through. I stared at her, completely stunned. My education began years before we met. My debt was mine alone. My struggle was mine alone. She had helped, yes, but she had not created my career. The arguments grew sharper, louder. She brought it up on car rides, in the kitchen, while I was putting on shoes for work, each time with more bitterness. She said she had been naive to think the prenup would not turn into a weapon against her. One night she snapped that I was selfish for refusing to share the fruits of our life together. I told her she was the one who insisted our finances stay separate. She stormed off and slammed the bedroom door. A week later, while sorting our tax documents, I opened her laptop to find a file she had left unsaved on the screen. It was a chain of emails between her and her lawyer. They had been discussing the prenup for nearly 3 years, not out of concern for fairness, not because she feared inequality, but because she expected my salary to skyrocket and wanted a plan in place to claim a portion of it. Her lawyer congratulated her for sticking to the timeline and waiting until my income stabilized before challenging the agreement. She had predicted everything. She had planned to push for dissolution as soon as I hit attending level. She had joked with her attorney about how easy it would be to argue emotional contribution. They discussed strategies for claiming part of my future raises. She had spent years preparing. The moment I read those messages, a coldness settled inside me. All those conversations, all the guilt she tried to place on me, all the late-night arguments had been rehearsed. None of it was spontaneous. None of it was emotional. It was strategy. When she came home that evening and saw the look on my face, she knew instantly what had happened. She tried to explain. She said it was only business planning, nothing more. She said she loved me, but the words did not land. They felt empty, like echoes of a script she had abandoned. Our marriage did not explode in one moment. It crumbled slowly over the next months, piece by piece, with each fake apology and each attempt to twist the story. Eventually, I moved out. I kept only what was mine. She hired a new lawyer and tried again to renegotiate the contract, but by then I had legal protection and proof of her prior intentions. She tried to reconnect, to convince me we could rebuild, but the sincerity was gone. Everything I thought was real had turned out to be a calculation. In the end, I walked away. Not because I won anything, not because I wanted revenge. I walked away because the moment I read those emails, I realized I had never been her partner. I had been her plan. After I moved out, life felt strangely silent. For the first time in years, there was no tight schedule of arguments, no tense conversations waiting for me at home, no careful tiptoeing around someone who always seemed to be calculating something behind her smile. I rented a small loft near the hospital. It was nothing glamorous. Exposed brick, uneven flooring, a balcony just big enough for one chair, but it felt like the first space in a long time that truly belonged to me. Marissa tried reaching out at first. She sent long messages about memories, about the years we traveled together, about how she believed we were stronger than one document and one mistake. She called it a misunderstanding, a moment of fear on her part. She insisted that the emails were being taken out of context, but the more she talked, the more I realized she was not trying to understand what I felt. She was trying to recover her position, trying to bring me back into the design she had created. My attorney advised me to stay cautious. He said her attempts to reconcile were likely part of a broader strategy. And deep down, I knew he was right. The tone of her calls always shifted when I did not give the answers she hoped for. One moment she sounded regretful, the next she sounded irritated, and sometimes she sounded almost rehearsed, as if she had practiced the conversation before dialing my number. Meanwhile, in the hospital, my work was becoming a refuge. I spent long nights in the trauma wing, stitching up the injured, watching monitors blink through the early hours of the morning. The pace kept me from overthinking, and my colleagues gave me space without prying. But the real turning point came one late afternoon when I received an unexpected message from a mutual friend, someone who had always been more her acquaintance than mine. He asked if we could meet briefly, said it concerned my separation. His tone was cautious, almost uneasy. We met in a quiet coffee shop away from the busy core of the city. He sat across from me and hesitated before speaking. He said Marissa had been talking, not about sorrow or regret, not about reconciliation, not even about heartbreak. She had been telling people she needed to convince me to dissolve the prenup before filing for divorce, because it was the only way she could secure her share of my future earnings. She had apparently mentioned that she expected a large raise the following year and wanted access to it before papers were signed. When he finished speaking, he looked down at his hands, almost embarrassed. He said he thought I deserved to know. I thanked him. Then I walked out into the cool evening air with a sickening clarity. She had not changed. not even for a moment. Every apology, every emotional plea, every message about love had been another angle, another attempt to regain a claim on what she believed she deserved. None of it was about us. None of it had ever been. It was about the plan she had begun years earlier. That night, sitting alone in my loft, I realized something deeper. She had never truly wanted a marriage. She had wanted a structure that fit her goals, a spouse who owed her, a life she could design around her own advantage. She had been loyal to the plan, not to me. So the next morning, I called my attorney. I told him to begin formal proceedings. I told him I wanted a clean and permanent separation. No negotiation, no mediation, no reconsideration. When the documents were delivered, she called repeatedly. At first, she sounded stunned, then angry, then desperate. But by then, there was no room left inside me for her stories. Our case moved quickly. The prenup held strong, and all her attempts to claim unfairness fell flat once her own emails were included. The judge even commented that the contract had been more than reasonable, considering it was drafted entirely by her legal team. When the proceedings ended, she stood outside the courthouse and watched me walk away. There was a strange look in her eyes, not loss, not sorrow, defeat. I left without speaking to her, without looking back, without the weight that had followed me for years. And in that quiet moment, I finally understood the truth I had refused to see. Some people enter your life to build a future with you. Others enter your life with a blueprint already in their hands. I had spent years trying to build a marriage. She had spent years executing a strategy. And walking away was not the painful part. Staying would have been.